Alright, class, sit down, shut the fuck up, and look at the board. Today we're going to be going over the basics you need for role playing games. And yes, that also means the kinky kind. Huh? What was that? Oh, not that kind of class. Right. Give me a second. Alright, everyone. Sit down, shut the fuck up, and look at me. We're going to be playing some role playing games. I need you bunch of cucks to understand what you're going to be playing. And don't touch those dice yet. Yes, I know it's confusing, but I'll explain the stats in a minute. Don't write anything down. Was that fucking pen? No, Wizard is prestige class. Oh, fuck it. We talk about class today on Why Are You Talking About This? Nerd. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Why Are You Talking About This Nerd? I'm your host, William, and I will be your guide to the world of role-playing games and why you only have 12 personality choices. I mean, not really why, but we're going to talk about where some of those come from. But before that, I just want to thank you all so much for listening. It truly means the world to me that you're all listening, especially on episodes that are put out this late. It truly means a lot to me. I tend to beat myself up over deadlines, so knowing that you still listen and enjoy is amazing. But before we get sappy, yes, I will be taking my 3-month break after next episode, and don't worry, I'll be coming back with episode in hand. I just need some time to recharge, relax, and remember why I love these shows and that they're not just an obligation. I've had some of that space I need in the last few days, and so I'm really looking forward to that. Also, I'm still a little bit sick. Not like a whole lot, but like enough to where I'm still coughing a bit. So I'm going to be editing that out. But I was waiting until my voice got better to record, but kind of ran out of time for that. So, but yeah, while I'm gone, just remember to keep listening and spreading the show. So, on to it. Alright, so we're going to be talking about class. Absolutely not a loaded topic, especially in the modern US. But unlike real life, class and role-playing games don't align, in general, to social station. Instead, they're a collection of abilities, aptitudes, and skills that are used to organize characters into a limited number of types. These often include assumptions about someone's reputation, background, behavior, career, and some general archetypes, and sometimes even body types. Also, we have a guest lecturer today. Little Colby Jack, little baby cheese. Don't chew on that, please. Baby boy. Come here. Okay. Well, my guest lecturer is a little drunk right now. He might need to go to the staff room and take a nap. Hold on one second. Okay, sorry about that. He keeps showing up to work drunk. That's why I haven't had him on the show before. He's a good lecturer when he's sober, but he's just. Anyways, these also commonly have their own distinct purpose and abilities, and sometimes even their own weaponry or equipment. Character classes are meant to tell you the strengths and weaknesses of a particular playstyle and lean into them, which lets you get down to playing the exact style of game you want to play. And getting to know the classes allows you to determine what skills and advantages and disadvantages they have and how they might apply to you and if you'd be okay taking those disadvantages. Like how most settings, mages are squishy. If you're okay with that, you get magic. If you aren't, you probably won't like the class. Also, class systems allow you to add a whole lot of content with a lot more freedom, because you can lock really powerful abilities to certain classes or group them thematically, or group thematic abilities and skills together. And the more powerful abilities with unique aesthetics, the more classes or subclasses you can create. But that's just the general concept of what a class is. But because of the history of role-playing games, there's 6 general archetypes of these classes that most games will follow. And follow along with me and see if you can think of a setting that doesn't have these, or an equivalent. So first is the fighting class. These are classes that excel in combat and tends to be designed specifically to use the system's combat mechanics to their advantage. They're usually designed with high accuracy and HP and have access to combat abilities. On the downside, they tend to not do much with the mystic parts of the settings, have abilities that are more linearly powerful compared to other classes having exponentially more powerful abilities, and they tend to flounder outside of combat a bit. Sometimes they can read people to figure out if they could take them, but they have really only one trick, but they do it pretty well. Second is the stealth class. They primarily excel at stealth, sneak attacks, and unorthodox fighting styles. If the game has a dedicated and detailed stealth system, they usually have skills that actively interact with it. And if not, they usually have abilities that pretend like stealth is its own system and allows them to play a little minigame about stealth. And while they tend to be fast and deal high damage, and have a whole range of utility powers and skills to help with their particular niche, they tend to be pretty fragile and straight up fight. However, they kind of have to be good at it, since a thief getting caught in a fantasy setting where they shouldn't be doesn't have the Geneva Conventions to help them. Playing in a modern setting, if no one knows you were there, no one can help you. Third is the magic user class. A class with very little physical prowess, but instead focuses on the setting's weirdness and magic. In fantasy settings would be something like magic. On sci-fi, it'd be things like technology or psychic powers. AKA magic, but with a new coat of paint. And while sure, this is very cool and neat, it's not without drawbacks. From spell slots to mana to miscasts, you have a very limited pool of magical resources over a period of time that you can reliably use. Which would be fine if you were useful in any way but for your magic. Which is often your primary use case, since you're usually pretty squishy and don't have very good social skills. Like a classic RPG player. Fourth is the exploration class. Often called the ranger, these classes are focused on their surroundings and skills to both fight enemies in their preferred environments, but also to use their environment to help their party do things. They're probably the most niche of the 5 standard classes, and also in a lot of game systems, since exploration isn't particularly focused on, these classes are oftentimes a bit too open-ended and underpowered. Because they don't usually have stellar or even good magic, have broadly applicable combat powers, or use particularly interesting skill sets. Fifth is the support/healer class. This is a class that's focused solely on helping allies, as the name implies, often with healing. In general, they draw from faith, conviction, or supernatural inspiration. And they're extremely powerful in this sense, because if you play correctly with all the buffs and powers they have, you can pull off some wacky shit like damage and fatigue immunity, 100% regeneration, your father coming home with milk and cigarettes, and 250% extra nut hair. However, on the downside, you generally suck at dealing damage, hitting people, or using your brain for more than comfort or support, and not like under the desk, support, like actual helpful support. And the last type is the rare class. This is the catch-all for whatever weirdos don't fit into the other 5. And yes, this is cheating. I already told you to try and find one that doesn't fit, and then plan to tell you this one. And also, this is why the house always wins. Now, besides being facetious, this is basically the class that interacts with your specific settings, weirdness, and unique mechanics. Hackers, artificers, weird race class combos, and similar concepts that don't fit well into other things. So, to summarize, for those of you who don't play role-playing games, chads, femboys, nerds, crunchy moms, religious intolerance, and autism spectrum. No, that wasn't all a setup for that stupid fucking joke, but I came up with it during the research, and I'll be goddamned if I don't use it. However, here's the deal. These 6 aren't the limit. In fact, modern D&D has 13, and essentially every setting has a various number of classes with their own set of mechanics. But where did this all start? Well, let's discuss that in the history section. Now, like a lot of episodes where we have a more streamlined history or things with extremely close focus or we don't want to get too far into the weeds, this is going to be pretty short. Like, I literally have 5 points. Because we don't go through a complex discussion of history. If you didn't know, I have these sections because it supports whatever I'm trying to say, not because it's something you intrinsically have to understand to use the information. That being said, again, remember that every game has their own suite of classes, and to go through the history would be fucking insane. Instead, all RPG classes have their origins in 1974. Well, kinda. Technically. See, because there were games being developed and played in the 60s with some role-playing elements, and actually there were, like, some full-on role-playing games. But they were really, really niche and small-scale and pretty simplistic, and you've honestly probably never heard of them. Instead, we begin with the game Dungeons and Dragons. At this point, the game Chainmail, a wargame that I desperately want to play, had been developed by Gygax and friends and was seeing some success. But they had been becoming a bit more character-focused, and so developed the game of D&D based on their wargame. Which seems to happen a lot, actually, except for Games Workshop, where it happened the other way around. But from that, they had 3 classes. Fighting Man, Magic User, and Cleric. Since, you gotta keep in mind, being a war game, there wasn't yet a place for the not killy, not healy classes yet. The next year, however, they had the Thief class and the Paladin subclass of the Fighting Man class in the Greyhawk supplement and setting, which kind of set D&D on the path to being the RPG it was always meant to be. Later on, they released Blackmoor, which added the Assassin subclass of the Thief and the Monk class. Yet another year later, Eldritch Wizardry came out, introducing the Druid. But not all was well in the group. See, between a lawsuit and the game becoming more complicated and complex, almost alienating so, and Gary Gygax being unwilling to alter his game in any way, the game divided between D&D and AD&D, with TSR, under Gary Gygax, keeping AD&D. In this split, the classes are divided. AD&D had the Bard, the Cleric with the Druid subclass, which actually makes more sense to me, the Monk, the Thief with the Assassin subclass, the Fighter with the Paladin and Ranger subclasses, and the Magic User with the Illusionist subclass. While D&D Basic had the classes of Cleric, Fighter, Magic User, Thief, Dwarf, Elf, and Halfling. Yes, they had race classes. But by this point, they stopped having a stranglehold on RPGs, as Warhammer RPG came out in 1983, alongside Rogue Trader, kind of, Call of Cthulhu in 1981, and BRP in 1981 as well. Which is when we see a bit of an expansion of the concept of classes, with the impact of D&D being undeniable, but with all the game systems trying to leave their own impressions. Under this pressure, AD&D's second edition is created, making an explosively large number of classes, something D&D in particular became well known for decades until the 2014 release of 5e. With many RPG systems taking their heed and releasing a massive number of classes alongside them. But like I said, we're not going too deep into that, so let's jump straight over to the applications and talk about how you can do this yourself. I know, this is the quickest that we've ever been here. Alright, so let's talk about making a class. And this is actually one that comes mostly from my own dome, because I have some actual experience in this field. I mean, first of all, I've been playing D&D since I was 12, and I've been playing D&D related games since I was like 8 or 9. And I also have, experience trying to make my own game systems. So first of all, you're going to want all your classes to be balanced to match the same fantasy. Do you have a system where the characters are great heroes? Then make sure everyone feels equally like a hero. Or if everyone is supposed to feel useless against the powers that be, then everyone better feel equally helpless. So balance each class with a number of equally weighed out strengths and weaknesses that confirm certain themes and playstyles. For example, I have not played Call of Cthulhu, but from what I understand, the players are deeply out of their element, so it wouldn't make sense to give them like 5e style skills and abilities. While in D&D 5e, your characters are meant to be great heroes. That's why all of your powers are so over the top and powerful. While a system that I love, like Masks, you are meant to represent people coming into their own as heroes. So they suck in most things, but they're getting better. But, all that's hard. You're probably thinking, why can't I just make my cool wizard boy and tell everyone else to eat my cock, you ask? Well, don't worry, this isn't actually all that hard. Just make classes focus on the main pillars of your gameplay, forehead. So in order to make our example classes, let's pretend that we have a game system already. So our 5 pillars are going to be combat, magic, negotiation, environmental, and skill challenges. This basically means that we have 5 sets of rules for our classes to interact with these classes getting bonuses for their particular pillar. But that doesn't really tell us too much about these classes. Essentially, right now we have combatant, magic man, negotiator, environmental dude, and skill monkey. So let's go some inspiration. Let's go find some inspiration somewhere. Hopefully without copying too much. So we want a fairly generic system to entirely rip off that no one really owns the rights to, that's easy for most people to understand, appeals to nerd culture in some way, and works well together while also creating more narrow and definitive conceptual spaces so it's easier for us to develop features. Well, I don't know about you, but that sounds like the 5-man band to me. So let's steal that one. So our archetype for the combat class is going to be modeled after the big guy, with its subclasses being archetypes for that trope. Without getting too much into the weeds, we'll just give them some impressive combat skills and defense bonuses, and the ability to pick up usually pretty useless but flavorful skills. It's going to be the same for our smart guy as the magic class, except exceptionally good at their niche, but not super useful for much else. As well as our heart for the negotiator. It does kind of get tricky with the lancer and the hero, but if we decide the hero first, our lancer literally falls into place because there's nowhere else. The primary trait of the hero is their range. They can do anything, but not very well. So that'll be our skill monkey with options to specialize over time. Meanwhile, our lancer gets pigeonholed with the environmental. And this might seem like a mismatch, but if we plan correctly, stealth is an environmental challenge. Meaning our edgelord, killers with a heart of gold, gets to stay as the lancer. Of course, we'll want to change out names as well. So our big guy becomes the warrior, our smart guy the mage, our heart becomes the diplomat, our lancer the rogue, and the hero becomes the savant. And boom, there you go, 5 classes for a Waytat RPG. But there's more to a class than the name. We need to give them abilities and powers. So to do that, we need to determine how much fluff and how much crunch they get. Fluff is the stuff that feels right. It's lore abilities and powers that add cool roleplay elements, but don't necessarily increase the power all that much. In general, only massive amounts of fluff can make up for a lack of crunch. Meanwhile, the crunch are hard mechanics that act right. They might not sound cool, but they do the actual necessary mechanical things. On the other hand, if you have too much crunch and not enough fluff, the class starts to lose its identity a bit. Now, in a perfect world, all of your abilities would be the right mix, but the world is very rarely perfect, and also we are people who are fallible, so instead, let's take it slow and focus on just keeping the mix healthy and interesting based on how fluff or crunchy the rules are. The crunchier the rules of the game, the crunchier the abilities. And to keep the power levels between the classes similar, all you have to do is when you're finished with the ability, note down your reaction to it. Do you think, oh fuck yeah, that's badass, or wow, that's strong for this level? about an equal amount of time for each class's abilities, then it's pretty well and balanced. As far as power spacing goes, space them out based on a combination of the maximum level characters can reach and how fast they're meant to increase in level. If they level slowly, front load the classes so they get more features at lower levels. If they level fast, backload the classes so they get more features at higher levels. And then finally, make sure you're fulfilling both the fantasy of the class and its purpose in the game. For example, fighters in D&D have almost always been good, especially at low levels, because the fantasy of the class is good at killing stuff with sword, and their meta purpose is to provide protection and teeth to the party at low levels, while providing them with a numerical advantage at high levels. Yes, it's a role-playing game. If your level 15 fighter hasn't started an academy or is a king of a faraway land, I'm going to tell you, you're just playing wrong. I am judging your fun, I am looking directly at you, and I am telling you, you are having fun the wrong way. I'm kidding, I'm just saying that because it's funny. Anyways, because of that, the fighter in 5e gains a fighting style, largely fluff, that supports the fantasy because only martially adept people have a fighting style. On the other hand, Second Wind allows you to survive longer in a fight, and is a largely crunch ability to make sure they serve their actual purpose of bussy blocker stopping the wizard from being turned into past tense. To figure out the fantasy, think about why people are attracted to that kind of character and play into it, while also playing into their role. While the subclasses are more specific forms of that fantasy and specialization. So then let's talk about our classes here, at least for their 2 level 1 powers. So our warrior, since their meta role is to A, be the ass kicker when people need to be waffle stomped, and B, getting slapped, smacked, stabbed, spanked, fondled, purple nurpled, and bonked and still keep breathing. And the fantasy is honestly probably the same thing. And the big guy is pretty easy. Most people, if they pick up a big guy, they just want to take hits. So our first feature is going to be something like Powerful Blows, where they get a bonus to damage equal to their level or something. And this is probably going to be our crunch. It might be more fluff, but I can see the min-maxers and algebra nerds pumping a few nuts out to the thought of how broken that could get. Meanwhile, our fluff is going to be something like exceptionally tough, which gives you bonus XP which gives you bonus HP when you increase in level or you rest. It's a nice passive that doesn't really hit. It's a nice passive that doesn't really hit as hard to be crunch, but it's cool and gives you a clear benefit. This is also probably going to be an easily abused multi-classing class, but burn that bridge when you get to it. Our mage's meta role is to be the primary spellcaster, meaning bringing the big guns and letting the DM drop all sorts of juicy lore all over them. And the fantasy is the whole Shadow Wizard Money Gang meme. So to bring them this fantasy, the first feature should clearly be spells. Let's say, to separate from D&D, you have a hard list of spells to pick from that are very rigid and specific to a flavor. So we'll call that Traditions of Magic. This is actually both fluff and crunch, a bit more crunch, but we can still imbue it with fluff. Their other feature will be something like Magical Secrets, giving bonuses to skill rolls related to your tradition of magic. Again, some crunch, but this is mostly fluff. So again, we have a fairly easily identified class with their own fantasy and roles fulfilled. Next is the Diplomat, whose meta role is to do all the roleplay, and also to mediate the party, because everyone else at the table are fucking nerds with no social skills, and no ability to differentiate the difference between character conflict and personal attack. And the fantasy likely has to do with swaying hearts and minds and giving everyone buffs. So we're going to go with the Silver Tongue feature, giving bonuses in negotiations, deceptions, and social interactions, which is going to be mostly, if not entirely, fluff. Meanwhile, their other feature is going to lean a little bit into magic, making them a secondary magic class. This being the Aura feature. Basically, you stand near the Diplomat and they give you bonuses, stacking for every party member nearby, which is hugely crunchy, and also really demands team cohesion, which might be another bonus to getting everyone to work together. Then is our Rogue, who is pulling double duty on the meta. Their purpose being helping everyone else get through difficult environments, also having the role of scout and assassin, with the fantasy being so much goddamn edge. So we're going to divide it along that line. One feature, the fluffier one, is Rogue's Cunning. With this, they can improvise tools and their own skills to work for the situation at hand, like the classic stealth build with high intimidation bonuses, or being really well suited and equipped for forest environments, but if need be, they can MacGyver their way out of anything using the tools that they have on hand. The other feature would be the more crunchy Craven Strike, which is basically just some kind of dirty trick they use that's totally dishonorable, but gives them one from the list of advantages against the target. Maybe even something like a double damage ability. And finally is our Savant, whose role is to just roll the dice roller. Their entire thing is making sure that the group passes skill challenges and checks. And the fantasy being good at dice rolling side and the fantasy is being good at the dice rolling side of the game, usually because it's someone that's bad at dice rolls. So again, in line with the meta. So their first feature would be Lucky, allowing you to reroll skill challenges rolls or allowing allies with a certain range to reroll, which is very crunchy. Meanwhile, their other ability, their Fluff, is Jack of all trades, where you gain half of a bonus on all skills in the same category as skills that you already have a bonus in. Paired with getting more skills early on, this creates a good baseline for doing the shit they need to be doing, and is also pretty fluffy. So with that, you have all your baseline classes. If you use these, I just ask you to shout at the show. If you have fan art or anything, shout me out there too. Really, anytime I go through the extra work for things like this, I'm hoping to turn into a blubbering baby when years down the road someone shows me their fan art of these. But, with that, let's end the show. Alright, and there you have it. Classes and how to make them. Hopefully that helped and you weren't excited for how to solve class disparity with a rocket-propelled grenade. Anyways, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast feed, like it, leave a review, whatever else it is you can do on your platform of choice. Send me an email at waytatpods@gmail.com. That is WAYTATPODS@gmail.com with questions, concerns, opinions, compliments, insults, actuallys, what class you'd play, your edgiest classes ever, and anything else you want to tell me. Also, follow me on Waytat. Follow me on Twitter at waytat_pods, and also check out my other podcast, Waytat, where I usually talk about like politics and real world issues and all of that depressing shit. Alright, have a good night. Have fun. Keep writing. And remember, they stole Acrobat from us with 3rd edition. May Watsy burn in hell. This has been Why You're Talking About This Nerd. I've been your host, William. Good night.